Uh, hey guys. Now it's been a while. The last video I released was back in October of 2022. It is now January of 2023. Yeah, it turns out that that update video that I released, wasn't actually, factual. But, I'm making up to you now by releasing this new video, so what can you really do? And as you can guess by my background that I have set up here, by all my Last of Us memorabilia, merchandise and whatnot, I am of course going to be talking about the Last of Us TV show that released on HBO, but rather more specifically I'm going to be talking about the opening episode, as so far that is all that has released thus far. But I still think the fact that it was so good that I figured I might as well make this video talking about it, because it's just really fantastic. And for the record, I'm not going to do like a week by week episode review of the show. I'm going to wait until the season concludes around mid-March before I do a full series review. So think of this as more so on my initial thoughts towards the series, rather than a full review on the entirety of the series as a whole, because as of now, only one episode has released, and there's all that. So, for a bit of a refresher for those unaware of The Last of Us and its history of getting an adaptation, The Last of Us was a video game that released back in 2013 on the PlayStation 3, developed by Naughty Dog, published by Sony, and it was directed by Bruce Straley and Neil Druckmann from a script that was primarily written by Druckmann, if not entirely written by Druckmann. And it follows the story of Joel, a man who is living in a 20 years after a fungal infection known as the cordyceps fungus has broken out and has basically mutated to a point where it has turned people into basically zombies, for lack of a better term, and how society has just crumbled since then. And now he is tasked with smuggling this young girl named Ellie across the United States in the hopes that she might be the key to a cure. When The Last of Us released back in 2013, it was critically acclaimed as one of the greatest video games released for that generation, and even of all time, I would argue, because the original Last of Us is still personally, for me, my all-time favorite video game, because it was really the video game that opened up my eyes to cinematic storytelling in video games. It's also one of those video games in which I got really deeply invested in. Like, at the time me currently recording this, I've at least played it like 4 or 5 times, most of which on the remastered version, but I have recently played through the PS5 remake a while ago, including the Left Behind DLC as well, so, I'm a huge fan, if you can tell. I haven't played part 1 since it initially released back in 2020, but that's because I know the fact that it's a huge time sink of a game, taking at least like 27 or ish hours to do. So that's why I haven't really, that's why I really haven't played it again, because, but not out of a hate towards the game, far from it. It's just, it's a lot, But anyways, now prior to the TV show, believe it or not, there was actually an attempt to have a Last of Us movie adaptation done. I believe actually shortly after the release of the game back in 2013, 2014, Neil Druckmann was actually going to serve as the writer of the movie, and Sam Raimi was actually involved as a producer on the project. And despite circling some names like Ramsey, Maisie Williams and Caitlin Dever both circled the role of Ellie, unfortunately, Druckmann ended up coming into creative differences with the studio in regards to what he thought the movie should be. With Druckmann feeling the fact that the movie should be a lower budgeted, almost road trip-like movie, kind of similar to something like No Country for Old Men, but Screen Gems, which was the company that, was, trying to make the movie, wanted to have it with these big, bombastic action sequences included, which was not at all what The Last of Us was about at all. So eventually the rights ended up lapsing back to Naughty Dog, and eventually sometime later, after Chernobyl ends up releasing. By the way, if you guys have not watched Chernobyl yet, I highly recommend it. It is really, really good stuff. But anyways, so after Chernobyl released, Neil Druckmann ended up coming into contact with Craig Mazin, who was the writer and creator of Chernobyl. And the reason why they were able to meet was because they both shared a mutual friend in actress Shannon Woodward, who played Dina in The Last of Us Part 2. And so eventually, after sitting down and talking with each other, both Mazin and Druckmann agreed that The Last of Us, if you were going to tell this story, it would be better suited to a television series as opposed to a movie. Because with a TV show, you have at least 10, 45 to 50-minute episodes to really dive into the characters and really get to see them grow and evolve over the course of the show. Whereas with the movie, you're limited to a runtime of around an hour 45 to 2 hours, 2 hours 10 max. Obviously, no movies have gotten way longer. Avatar 2 was a very prime example of that. But that's just the general area about how long I believe movies should be. Like from an hour 45 to 2 hours, 2:10 if you really need it. But anyways. So eventually in early 2020, it was announced that a TV show was in development and that Mazin and Druckmann were the creators and also served as writers, executive producers, and they even directed a couple of episodes too, which I'll get to that in a bit. And then, of course, obviously, we ended up getting the news of the casting, like Pedro Pascal being cast as Joel, Bella Ramsey as Ellie, Gabriel Luna as Tommy, and even stuff like Meryl Dandridge reprising her role of Marlene from the games for the show, I thought was really cool. But anyways, so then eventually, they filmed the series from July of 2021 to June of 2022. So they've been working on this for a while now. And initially, for the pilot episode, they were going to get Johan Rennick, who was the director of the Chernobyl miniseries, was supposed to come on board to serve as director and executive produce the series. But unfortunately, due to, complications with the pandemic, he couldn't. So they ended up getting Beanpole director Kantemir Balagov to serve as the director for the pilot episode instead. But unfortunately, he left the project due to creative differences with, the studio. And so eventually his episode was scrapped and Craig Mazin ended up coming on board to serve as the new director for the pilot. In fact, the episode, when it released, it was originally supposed to be the first 2 episodes. In fact, the point in which it was supposed to end, the original episode 1, was the moment when it jumps forward in time 20 years later when you see Joel in the quarantine zone and he's he's burning bodies. But HBO was like, I don't think people are going to want to stay tuned till next week if this is how episode 1 ends. And not only that, but Ellie wasn't even included in the episode at all. And she's she is incredibly pivotal to the story of The Last of Us alongside Joel. Like, having The Last of Us without Ellie would be like if you had something like BioShock Infinite without Elizabeth, or Spider-Man without Mary Jane Watson. It feels like you're taking a very vital character and very vital piece of this puzzle right out, and you're missing a lot of what makes this story great. So that's why they had the first 2 episodes come together for the first episode that we see now, When You're Lost in the Darkness. That's why the episode is an hour and 25 minutes long, because it's the first 2 episodes put together. But now that I'm done giving you all the background as to how the series came to be and some of the production troubles along the way, how is it as a show? How is the first episode? Really, really dang good. Like, even though I am really well familiar with the story of The Last of Us, and I'm very familiar with the games and all the other stuff, I was really captivated throughout the first episode. And I think the fact that if you've never played or even heard of The Last of Us prior to the TV show, I still think the fact that it works really, really well, because even though that, it does include some references to the games and whatnot, you can still understand the story and you can still be captivated by the character drama to not worry about it being an adaptation of a video game. In fact, if it manages to maintain this level of quality throughout the rest of the season, this could be the best video game adaptation ever made. Like, I'm dead serious. But anyways, so now I want to get more into the specifics about The Last of Us, the first episode at least, and some points that I really wanted to mention about what made this episode so great. First of all, its faithfulness to the source material. This is about as accurate as a video game adaptation that you can possibly get in terms of its story, its characters, its locales, its style, tone, all that other jazz. And there are even some moments that are line for line directly ripped from the games. Like there's an exchange in which Joel and Ellie are actually sitting in an apartment waiting for Tess to come back, and the dialogue that they share between the two is literally ripped right from the games. Even though some of the camera shots too that they used too came from the games as well. And also in the opening half of the episode in which we see the outbreak first break out, and we see the bit in which Sarah, Tommy, and Joel are driving away in the truck, it is very reminiscent about how that was shot in the games as well. But it's not to the series' detriment, though. Like, the faithfulness to the source material doesn't counteract the fact that, this is a TV show. You are going to have to do some things differently compared to the video game. Like, for example, in the video game, the outbreak ended up happening in 2013, which was when the first game initially released, but then it jumps forward in time 20 years later to 2033. They decided instead to shift the time frame so the pandemic actually starts in 2003. And that actually makes it a little bit more scarier because it's 2003 and the internet was nowhere near as prevalent as it was now. Like, you'll see something like Sarah and she's going into a shop, and then you'll just see like all these fire trucks and police cars that are just driving down the street, and you're wondering, I wonder what that could be all about. Or then like there'll be those moments of like you'll see like these jets and airplanes just flying over, and be like, oh, that's very ominous. And then obviously, of course, one of the more bigger changes was that they actually removed the spores, which is one of the main ways about how the cordyceps is able to spread is once somebody's infected and they fully die and their body becomes ingrained with the surface of whatever they stick on, they end up producing spores, which anybody who ends up inhaling it ends up, getting, infected as well. And so people have to wear gas masks in order to make sure the fact they don't get infected. But after realizing the fact that they probably couldn't keep up with that kind of gas mask look for the entire show, they realized the fact that they would have to get rid of the spores and instead replace them with tendrils, which is how, the main means of spreading and infecting. And I don't mind that change at all. I really don't mind it because it really does, unless it's something ends up happening way later on in which that change actually does end up negatively affecting the story or whatnot. But as it is right now, I think it's an okay change and I really don't mind it. Then there are the performances. I don't know how they did it, but everybody that they cast in this show embodies the role that they were chosen for perfectly. Pedro Pascal, oh my gosh, he kills it as Joel. Like, he's really able to do a great job of being able to embody the fatherly nature that Joel has, obviously, of course, because of Sarah and whatnot. But he's also able to showcase the fact that Joel is still a broken man who is capable of producing evils, and he's full of just as much darkness as the infected themselves. And they'll have like these subtle nuances that he'll bring that I'm like, wow, that I did not think of that. And then of course you got Bella Ramsey as Ellie. She really is able to capture Ellie's foul-mouthed nature, and she's also able to showcase her kind of defiance, but also her inherent need for kinship, and also showcasing the fact that even though she is a kid, she is still very, very capable of herself. Like, Bella Ramsey did such a great job bringing Ellie to life, because it's just the way it's so good, guys. It was so good. Then Gabriel Luna as Tommy, I thought was fantastic as well. His voice sounds almost identical to Jeffrey Pierce's Tommy in the games. Nico Parker as Sarah. When the episode opens, and it is in 2003, and you see her waking up and going about like a typical day, specifically it's her dad's birthday, and you see her going to school, you see her getting some money to repair Joel's watch, you see her go to the watch repair shop in order to do it, you see her come back, you see her also visit some neighbors and whatnot. It's all kept from her perspective, and you really like Sarah, and Nico Parker does a great job of being able to embody this kid, and who basically serves as a POV character for like the first half of the episode, kind of like how Sarah served as the POV character for the opening prologue of the game, which makes that inevitable moment with that happens later on all that much more heartbreaking. I don't want to talk about what exactly happens, even if you are aware of the games, because I don't want to spoil it for those that have not yet seen the episode or are not as well familiar with the games or the story as a lot of other people are, like myself. So there's that. Anna Tov, I thought, was really great as Tess. She showcased the fact that, you know, she has a little bit of bitterness to her, but she also has a lot of truthfulness to her. And you see the fact that there's a reason why her and Joel are smuggling partners together, because they both come from similarly broken backgrounds and they're just trying to make the best of what they can. Although I will admit the fact that there were some moments when she was yelling, that because she is an Australian actress, that it felt like the fact that her American accent that she was doing kind of broke through a little bit. There were two moments, one in which she was being incapacitated by some soldiers, and the other towards the end when she's yelling for Joel's name. But other than that, I thought she did great. And one detail that, and of course, one casting choice that I really loved was Meryl Dandridge as Marlene, because she played the exact same role in the original games. Like, it is very rare for a video game adaptation to bring on the original actor or actress who played the character in the games for the adaptation. Like for the upcoming Super Mario Brothers movie, even though Charles Martinet, who has been the voice of Mario for like the past 25, 30 years now, he's going to be in the movie, but he's not playing Mario. He's going to be playing a different character. And instead, Chris Pratt is not going to be playing Mario, which obviously they went with that for more marquee value or whatever, but I don't know. But it's very rare whenever you have the same actor portraying the same character in a different medium. But when it does happen, it's really cool. It's like when Katie Sackhoff ends up appearing as Bo-Katan in the Clone Wars and Rebels, and then you see her pop up in The Mandalorian, and it's like, oh, that's really cool, the fact that they got the same actress who played that character in that one show for this. That's really cool. Then there's the music. The music by Gustavo Santaolalla and David Fleming, I believe David Fleming is the other composer, was really incredible. Gustavo, for those who don't know, was actually the composer of the games, and they brought him back on board for the show. And I thought that was also really great because Gustavo's music for these games is incredible, because the music that he is able to produce for the games really manages to give this sense of hauntingness to it. But there's also a kind of beauty to it, and it also really helps to emphasize the emotion of a scene. But the music doesn't undercut the scene at all. It's not blaring over the top of this scene. It's like, oh, it's a sad scene, start crying. But rather it helps to, instead of, undercutting it, it complements the scene really, really well. It complements the mood really well. And also the opening title sequence in which we see the cordyceps spreading, and they actually play the theme that Gustavo composed for the opening of the first game. It was just incredible. It was so good. The direction by Craig Mazin, I thought, was also really good too. The way that he went for it was very handheld. And when you're doing a handheld style, that could very easily, kind of not work. But because of the situations that we're in, and because, obviously, of course, you want to be able to get a sense about how close you feel being trapped in these situations with these characters, I think it works really well. And also, the production design is absolutely fantastic. From the sets, to the clothing that everybody wears, to the makeup of the infected itself. Like, we haven't even gotten to see a clicker yet, and we're not going to see a clicker until, like, next episode. But from what I've seen, oh my gosh, those effects look amazing. Like, it really manages to sell you on the fact that this is a world that has fallen. It has crumbled in decay, and those that remain are still trying to do what they can in order to survive. And it's incredible, man. Like, yeah, this was a really, really good opening of an episode. So final thoughts. This was great. Uh, the performances from everybody around were top tier quality stuff. The faithfulness to the source material was great without it being a drag or an undercurrent on the drama and the emotion of the show. The music was absolutely fantastic. The production design was absolutely fantastic. Basically, almost everything about this episode was fantastic. And if this is the kind of quality that we can expect for the next few episodes, I'm hooked. And I mentioned this for many years, but like ever since The Last of Us got greenlit, it has basically been my most anticipated television series basically the past 2 to 3 years. And with this episode, it very much justifies that hype. So if you have not already, check out The Last of Us. It is a really fantastic opening episode. Very excited to see how the rest of the series plays out. And yeah, that's really about all I have to say about the opening episode of The Last of Us. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to like, subscribe, all that other stuff. And always remember, when you're lost in the darkness, look for the light.